The first time Lyra Bennett saw a Sonori up close, she was elbow-deep in bioluminescent moss and cursing the automated watering system. The greenhouse's humidity controls had malfunctioned again, creating a foggy haze that made the crystal formations glow like trapped stars. "Another late night, Dr. Bennett?" The voice of Station Director Reeves crackled through her earpiece. "The diplomatic transport's arriving early. Thought you should know." Lyra wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. "Thanks for the warning. I'll stay out of the way." "Actually," Reeves paused, "I need you to brief the envoy on our botanical research. You're the expert on crystal plant symbiosis." "What?" Lyra's hand slipped, disturbing a cluster of moss that pulsed angry red. "I'm not dressed for. Just be yourself." The Sonori requested someone who actually does the work, not another politician. The communication clicked off before she could protest. Lyra looked down at her soil-stained work clothes and sighed. 6 years on Helios 7, studying the mysterious relationship between crystalline formations and native flora, and now she had to explain it all to a species that probably thought humans were barely more evolved than the moss she was handling. The airlock cycled behind her with a soft hiss. Lyra turned, expecting Reeves, but instead found herself facing a figure that made her breath catch. The Sonori stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Traditional silver markings traced patterns across exposed skin, diplomatic markings, if Lyra remembered correctly. But it was the eyes that held her attention, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, each one containing swirling galaxies of gold. "I am Kravak Enthal," the Sonori said, voice resonating at a frequency that made the crystals hum. "You are the one who speaks to plants." Lyra almost laughed at the description. "I study them. Dr. Lyra Bennett, xenobotanist. Though right now I probably look more like a gardener. The distinction is meaningful to humans." Kravak's head tilted slightly. "Among my people, those who tend life are held in highest regard." Before Lyra could respond, the greenhouse's emergency systems blared to life. Red warning lights pulsed as Director Reeves's voice echoed through the chamber, "Class 3 sandstorm approaching. All personnel to secure locations." "This is not a drill." Lyra's heart raced. "We need to get to the main complex." She started gathering her tools, but Kravak remained still, all 3 eyes fixed on the crystalline formations. "These resonate with the storm," they observed. "The frequency is familiar. They're also deadly when they shatter." Lyra grabbed Kravak's arm without thinking. The scales were smooth and cool beneath her fingers. "Please, we have to." The first wave hit. The greenhouse shuddered as sand particles pelted the outer shell. The crystals began to sing, their harmonics building to a dangerous pitch. Lyra had seen what happened next. The resonance would build until they exploded, sending razor-sharp shards in every direction. But Kravak moved toward them instead of away. "What are you doing?" Lyra shouted over the rising cry of crystal and wind. "The pattern is wrong," Kravak's voice carried despite the chaos. "It requires balance." To Lyra's astonishment, Kravak began to hum. The sound was unlike anything she'd heard before, multi-toned, as if multiple voices were emerging from one throat. The crystal's dangerous song wavered, then began to shift, matching the new frequency. The storm raged outside, but inside the greenhouse, something extraordinary was happening. The crystals pulsed in rhythm with Kravak's song, their light dimming from dangerous white to a soft blue. The bioluminescent moss responded too, creating waves of gentle color that moved like ocean currents. Lyra stood transfixed, her scientific mind racing to understand what she was witnessing. This was beyond anything in their research data. The Sonori weren't just advanced technologically, they had some fundamental understanding of the natural world that humans hadn't even begun to grasp. As the storm began to pass, Kravak's song faded. The crystals settled into a peaceful hum, and the moss returned to its normal state. Only then did Lyra realize she was still holding Kravak's arm. She let go quickly, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. That was incredible. How did you know? All things have their song, Kravok said simply. Even the spaces between stars make music, if one knows how to listen. They turned all three eyes to her. You understand this too, yes. I see it in how you touch the plants, with knowledge, but also with respect for their melody. Lyra found herself smiling. I never thought of it that way. I'd love to learn more about your people's understanding of harmonic relationships in nature. If you're willing to share, of course. Knowledge, like music, is meant to be shared. Kravok's scales rippled with subtle colors that Lyra suspected might indicate pleasure. Perhaps we could begin with why you choose to work when others rest. The night cycle holds its own songs. And so, surrounded by softly glowing crystals and the aftermath of chaos, Lyra began to explain her research to someone who might actually understand it in ways she never had. She told Kravok about the mysterious patterns of growth, the way the crystals seemed to protect certain plants while destroying others, and her theories about conscious selection. As she spoke, she noticed Kravok making subtle sounds, not quite humming, but something close, and the plants responded, shifting and swaying as if in a gentle breeze. It was like watching someone read a familiar book in a completely different language, seeing new meaning in every page. When Director Reeves finally came to check on them, he found the human scientist and the Sonori diplomat deep in discussion about propagation patterns, surrounded by contentedly glowing flora. The crystals sang soft harmonies that would baffle the station's sensors for weeks to come. I think, Lyra said later that night in her personal log, we've been asking the wrong questions. We've been studying these life forms as separate entities, but what if everything here is part of one giant symphony? And what else might we learn, if we just learn how to listen? She didn't mention how Kravok's harmonics still echoed in her mind, or how their scales had felt under her fingers, or the way their triple gaze seemed to see straight through to her core. Some observations, she decided, were better kept to herself. At least for now. But as she drifted off to sleep, the crystals in her small sample collection hummed a melody she'd never heard before, and she dreamed of stars that sang. 3 weeks after the sandstorm incident, Lyra found herself sitting cross-legged on the observation deck, surrounded by scattered data pads and an array of small crystalline samples. The massive viewport before her revealed Helios 7's 3 moons hanging like pearls in the purple sky. Your posture suggests discomfort, Kravok's resonant voice came from behind her. Yet you maintain it. Lyra didn't turn around, but a smile tugged at her lips. Humans can be stubborn that way. Besides, I'm trying to mimic your meditation stance. Without proper instruction. There was an unfamiliar note in their harmonic voice, amusement, perhaps. That explains the misalignment of your vertebral structure. Before Lyra could respond, she felt cool, scaled hands adjust her shoulders gently. The touch sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Oh, she breathed, as her muscles relaxed into a more natural position. Better, Kravok settled beside her, their iridescent scales catching the starlight. Though I remain curious why humans resist asking for help. Lyra turned to face them, noticing how their 3 eyes swirled with different patterns today, more copper than gold. Says the diplomat who spent 2 days trying to understand Earth music without asking me to explain time signatures. A fair observation. Kravok's scales rippled with that color shift she'd learned indicated pleasure. Though I maintain that your jazz defies mathematical logic. That's exactly why I love it. Lyra reached for her personal tablet. Here, listen to this. It's called Take 5, a classic example of unusual time signatures in human music. As the first notes filled the observation deck, Kravok's central eye widened slightly. The crystals scattered around them began to pulse in rhythm with the saxophone's melody. Lyra watched, fascinated, as Kravok's scales shifted through subtle shades of blue and purple. The mathematics are elegant, they finally said. Though chaotic. Like your storm patterns. Is that a compliment or a criticism? An observation. Kravok turned all 3 eyes to her. Like my observation that you've been avoiding the subject you actually wish to discuss. Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks. Sometimes she forgot that Sonori could sense subtle changes in body temperature and heart rate. I've been analyzing the data from the storm, she said, picking up one of her data pads. The way you harmonized with the crystals, it shouldn't have been possible. Our understanding of crystalline resonance patterns suggests that they should have shattered. Kravok's scales darkened slightly. Your understanding is incomplete. As was ours, once. There was something in their tone that made Lyra set down her pad. What do you mean? Kravok was quiet for a moment, their scales rippling with deep blues that Lyra had never seen before. During the Stellar Divide War, my people believed we understood everything about harmonic resonance. We used it as a weapon. Entire worlds were shattered by songs of destruction. The revelation hit Lyra like a physical force. She'd been a child during that war, living in an underground shelter while the surface of her colony world rang with strange, terrible frequencies. You were there. I was a harmony master, Kravok said softly. I led the third wave against the Proxima colonies. Lyra's breath caught. Proxima 4. That was my home. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken weight. The jazz continued to play, its complex rhythms now seeming to mock the tension in the air. Lyra reached over and shut it off. I lost my parents in that attack, she said, surprised by how steady her voice remained. The crystals and the mineral mines, they all shattered at once. The entire settlement collapsed. I know. Kravok's voice carried harmonics of grief she'd never heard before. I discovered later that the mining settlement contained no military targets. Only families. Scientists. People who studied the very harmonies we perverted into weapons. They turned to face her fully. It is why I requested this diplomatic posting. Why I chose to work with a xenobotanist who studies crystal resonance. Understanding dawned slowly. You're trying to make amends. I am trying to learn what my people forgot, that harmony is not about control. It is about balance. About listening. Their scales shifted to a soft violet. Your jazz teaches this. Different voices, playing their own songs, yet creating something greater together. Lyra found herself reaching out, placing her hand on Kravok's scaled arm just as she had during the storm. This time, though, the touch was deliberate. Show me, she said. Show me how to listen properly. For the next several hours, they worked together. Kravok taught her the basic harmonics of Sonori meditation, how to feel the vibrations of the crystals not just with instruments, but with her whole body. In return, she introduced them to different styles of earth music, classical, folk, electronic, explaining how each style reflected different aspects of human culture and emotion. As the station's night cycle approached, Lyra found herself humming along with the crystal's natural frequency, while Kravok added harmonies that made the sample dance with light. Their voices twined together, human and Sonori, solo and multi-toned, creating something entirely new. Your voice carries pain, Kravok observed quietly, yet you choose to sing anyway. So does yours, Lyra replied. Maybe that's why we can harmonize. Their eyes met, all three of Kravok's meeting her too, and something shifted between them, like the moment in a piece of music when dissonance resolves into harmony. The others will not understand, Kravok said, their scales showing traces of a new color Lyra hadn't seen before. A harmony master and a survivor of their attacks, working together. Learning each other's songs. Then we'll teach them how to listen, Lyra said firmly. Besides, I think we've already proven that impossible things can happen. You did get me to appreciate mathematics in music, after all. Kravok's scales rippled with that pleasure-indicating pattern again. And you taught a Sonori to appreciate chaos. Director Reeves will be most concerned. Let him be, Lyra smiled, turning back to their scattered research materials. Now, about these resonance patterns we recorded. But as they returned to their work, something had fundamentally changed. Their movements around each other were more fluid now, like dancers who had finally learned their partner's rhythm. And if their hands brushed more often than strictly necessary while exchanging data pads, well, that was just another kind of harmony being discovered. In her quarters that night, Lyra added a new entry to her personal log. Today I learned that understanding can grow in the spaces between forgiveness and curiosity. And that sometimes, the most beautiful songs are the ones we never expected to sing. The crystals in her room hummed in agreement, their frequency matching the peaceful rhythm of her heart. The first warning came as a whisper. Lyra was in the middle of explaining photosynthesis variations in crystal-influenced plants when she noticed her specimen trembling. Across the greenhouse, other crystals began to vibrate, emitting a discordant hum that made her teeth ache. "Something's wrong," she muttered, reaching for her diagnostic tablet. "The resonance patterns are." The station's alert system blared to life. Emergency protocol initiated. Atmospheric pressure dropping in sectors 7 through 12. All personnel begin evacuation procedures. Kravok's scales shifted to a dark, stormy gray. The generators. They moved in unison, rushing from the greenhouse toward the Environmental Control Center. The corridors were already filling with panicked staff members heading toward the emergency shelters. "Dr. Bennett." Director Reeves's voice crackled through her comm. "The atmospheric stabilization crystals are experiencing some kind of harmonic disruption. We need static cut through the transmission." "The frequencies being manipulated," Kravok said, their three eyes scanning rapidly as they ran. "Someone is using old war techniques." Lyra's heart clenched. "Like on Proxima 4. "Similar, but more precise. They're targeting the stabilization matrix itself." They reached the Environmental Control Center to find it already evacuated. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow, and the bank of stabilization crystals that helped maintain the station's artificial atmosphere was pulsing with an angry white light. Lyra went straight to the control panel. "The resonance is building exponentially. If those crystals shatter, the atmospheric shell will collapse," Kravok finished. "Everyone in the station will die. Can you stop it? Like you did during the storm?" Kravok moved closer to the crystals, their scales rippling with concern. "This frequency is encrypted. Layered. It would take multiple harmony masters to." They stopped suddenly, turning to Lyra. "Unless." "Unless what?" "Your chaos." Kravok's eyes swirled with intensity. "Jazz doesn't follow standard mathematical patterns. If we combine my harmonics with your unpredictable human frequencies." Lyra understood immediately. "We create interference patterns they couldn't have predicted." "But it's dangerous," Kravok warned. "If we're off by even a fraction." The crystal's pulsing increased, sending shards of pain through Lyra's head. "We don't have a choice." Kravok nodded. "Follow my lead frequency, but don't try to match it. Add your own pattern, like in your Take 5. They began to hum, producing that incredible multi-tone sound that had first captured Lyra's attention. She closed her eyes, thinking of jazz clubs she'd visited on Earth, of improvised solos and unexpected rhythms. She began to sing, letting her voice weave between Kravok's harmonics. The crystal's dangerous white light flickered. "It's working," Kravok said between tones. "Keep going. Add more variance." Lyra switched to an old blues melody, something raw and emotional that her mother used to sing. She felt Kravok's hand slip into hers, their scaled fingers intertwining with her own. Their combined frequencies filled the room, alien harmony and human soul, mathematics and emotion, order and chaos dancing together. The stabilization crystals began to pulse in a new rhythm, their light shifting from white to blue to a soft purple. The warning klaxon ceased, replaced by the steady hum of normal operations. "Atmospheric pressure stabilizing," the computer announced. "Emergency protocols deactivated." Lyra sagged against Kravok, suddenly exhausted. Their scales were warm against her skin, shifting through colors she'd never seen them display before. That was remarkable, they said softly. I've never experienced harmonics like that. Dr. Bennett. What's your status? Director Reeves burst into the control center with a security team, then stopped short at the sight of them still holding hands. Lyra straightened but didn't let go of Kravak. The crisis is contained, but this was deliberate sabotage. Someone tried to use Sonori harmonic weapons technology to destroy the station. Impossible, Reeves said. All harmonic weapons were destroyed after the war. It was part of the peace treaty. Not all knowledge can be destroyed, Kravak's scales darkened. And not everyone welcomed peace. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, we found this near the secondary crystal array. He held up a small device emitting a faint hum. Kravak's eyes widened. That's Sonori technology, but it's been modified with human components. Both sides working together. Lyra frowned. But why? Who would want to? A new alarm sounded, this one accompanied by flashing blue lights. Unknown vessel detected leaving docking bay 3, the computer announced. No flight plan registered. Trace that ship. Reeves barked into his comm, I want to know who was on board and where they're going. But Lyra was already accessing the greenhouse's security feeds on her tablet. The crystal samples we were studying, half of them are missing. Along with all our recent research data, Kravak added, checking their own device. Someone wanted more than just destruction. They wanted our work on crystal harmonics. But we've only been studying healing applications, Lyra protested. Growth patterns, plant symbiosis. Which could be reversed to understand destruction. Kravak's scales shifted to that stormy gray again. What heals can also harm, if the knowledge is perverted. Reeves looked between them. You two are now our lead investigators on this. Figure out who did this and why. But keep it quiet, if word gets out that someone's developing new harmonic weapons. It could restart the war, Lyra finished softly. After Reeves left, Lyra and Kravak stood in silence, watching the stabilization crystals pulse with their new shared frequency, a permanent reminder of what they'd created together. I should report this to my superiors, Kravak said finally. I know. Lyra squeezed their hand. But not everything. Their scales rippled with a color she was beginning to recognize as affection. No. The harmony we created, that knowledge stays between us. Good. Lyra turned to face them fully. Because I think we're going to need more impossible songs before this is over. Kravak's eyes swirled with determination and something deeper. Then we shall compose them together. As they left the control center, the crystals hummed their new melody, a song of human chaos and Sonori order, of destruction transformed into creation, of two voices finding harmony in the most unlikely of places. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a ship carried stolen knowledge and dangerous possibilities, unaware that it had catalyzed something far more powerful than any weapon, understanding between two people who should have been enemies, but chose to create music instead. The Sonori diplomatic vessel arrived without warning, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in familiar patterns. Lyra recognized the harmonic signature, it was a high-command ship. She found Kravak in their shared laboratory, their scales a muted gray she'd never seen before. You knew they were coming. Harmony Master Nyrix has arrived, Kravak said, their three eyes fixed on a dancing crystal specimen. My former bondmate. The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. In their months of growing closer, Kravak had never mentioned a bondmate. I didn't know. The bond was severed during the war. Their scales rippled with complex emotions. When I chose to question our methods, Nyrix chose loyalty to the old ways. Before Lyra could respond, the laboratory door slid open. The Sonori who entered was taller than Kravak, their scales a deep midnight blue etched with gold ceremonial patterns. All three eyes burned with amber fire. This harmony spreads through the void, Nyrix's voice resonated at a frequency that made the laboratory crystals shiver. Yet I find you here, playing with plants and humans. Harmony Master. Kravok's tone was carefully neutral. Your arrival was unexpected. As was your betrayal. Nyrix produced a data crystal that pulsed with urgent light. Evidence suggests you've been sharing forbidden harmonics knowledge with humans. Creating new frequencies that could destabilize the peace treaty. That's not true, Lyra stepped forward. We've been working to understand crystal growth patterns, not weapons. Nyrix's eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. The human who sings chaos. Yes, we know of your experiments. They turned back to Kravok. The stolen research was traced to a radical human group calling themselves the Discord faction. They claim to have a Sonori ally within this station. Impossible, Kravok's scales darkened. I would never. You've done it before, Nyrix cut in. Questioned authority. Abandoned your mate. Betrayed your principles for what you called understanding. Their scales shifted to display military ranks and battle honors. The High Command has ordered your immediate return for questioning. Lyra's mind raced. Something about this felt wrong. The timing, the accusations. Wait. How did you trace the research so quickly? We've only been investigating for 3 weeks. Humans cannot comprehend the efficiency of Sonori intelligence networks, Nyrix dismissed. No, Lyra pressed, moving closer to Kravok. You knew details we haven't released. About the Discord faction. About our combined harmonics. Kravok's scales suddenly flared with recognition. The encryption pattern on the sabotage device, it matched your personal frequency. The old ways must be preserved, Nyrix's voice took on a dangerous resonance. If a few humans die in the process of preventing greater corruption, that is an acceptable dissonance. You arranged the theft, Lyra realized. To discredit our research. To stop us from proving that harmonics can heal instead of destroy. To save our people from weakness, Nyrix's scales blazed with zealous patterns. Look at you, Kravok. Diminished. Softened by human chaos. Your frequencies already show contamination. You're wrong, Kravok's voice carried new harmonics, strength and certainty Lyra had never heard before. What you call contamination is growth. Evolution. The very essence of true harmony. Nyrix's hand moved to a crystal device at their belt. Then you leave me no choice. The High Command will. Will what? Director Reeves's voice cut through the tension as he entered with a security team. Explain why a senior Harmony Master conspired with human extremists. Violated multiple peace treaty provisions. Lyra smiled grimly. We suspected internal involvement. Been broadcasting this whole conversation to both human and Sonori authorities. It's over, Nyrix, Kravok said softly. The old songs must change. What happened next was too fast for human eyes to follow. Nyrix activated their crystal device, sending a shattering frequency through the lab. But Kravok was faster, pulling Lyra close and producing a protective harmonic that surrounded them both. Their combined presence, human and Sonori together, created an interference pattern that neutralized Nyrix's attack. The security team's stun weapons did the rest. Later, after Nyrix had been taken into custody and the political firestorm had begun, Lyra found Kravok in the observation deck, watching the stars. Your scales, she said quietly. They're showing a new color. A new frequency, they turned to face her. One that only emerged after I met you. Is that why Nyrix really came? Because we're breaking patterns? Creating impossible harmonies? Their scales rippled with that now familiar affection. Yes. Some fear what they cannot categorize. Lyra stepped closer, placing her hand over their scaled one. And you? Do you fear this uncategorized thing between us? No, Kravok's voice carried the complex harmonics she'd grown to love. I fear only the silence that would exist without it. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient dance, while below, their fingers intertwined, scales against skin, chaos meeting order, creating a whole new song. The joint human-Senori council chamber hummed with tension. Crystalline pillars lined the walls, their frequencies carefully tuned to promote calm and clarity, a design that now felt like bitter irony to Lyra as she faced the assembled delegates. Dr. Bennett, the human chairwoman, leaned forward. You propose completely restructuring our understanding of harmonic technology. Based on research conducted with a former harmony master who once used these same principles as weapons. How can we trust this? Beside her, Kravok's scales maintained their diplomatic neutral tone, but Lyra could sense their anxiety in the subtle vibration of the crystal samples they'd brought. Because trust is exactly what this research proves we need, Lyra activated their presentation matrix. The chamber filled with holographic displays of crystal growth patterns, DNA helixes, and harmonic wavelengths. What we've discovered isn't just about crystals or music or weapons. It's about connection. She gestured to the nearest display. These are crystal formations exposed to traditional Senori harmonics. Perfect. Orderly. But limited. Another gesture showed their experimental samples. And these were grown using combined human-Senori frequencies. They're stronger, more adaptable, and capable of things neither of our species imagined. Like surviving in toxic environments, Kravok added, their voice carrying carefully measured tones. Purifying contaminated water. Even healing radiation damage from old war zones. Precisely because they incorporate chaos theory and improvisation with mathematical precision, Lyra continued. Our differences don't weaken the harmony, they enhance it. An elderly Senori counselor's scales flickered with doubt. Pretty words, but Harmony Master Nyrix's actions prove the dangers of sharing such knowledge. No, Kravok's scales suddenly blazed with colors that made the chamber's crystals resonate. Nyrix proved the danger of fearing change. Of clinging to old songs when new ones are needed. Lyra felt a surge of pride at their boldness. 6 months ago, Kravok would never have challenged a council elder so directly. But they'd both changed, grown stronger together. Look, she said, bringing up their final data set. These readings are from the attempted sabotage. Traditional harmonic weapons failed against our combined frequency because it created something entirely new. Something that could only exist through cooperation and trust. She took a breath, then activated the chamber's acoustic systems. The air filled with a strange, beautiful melody, Senori harmonics intertwined with human voice, mathematics dancing with emotion. The crystals throughout the room began to pulse with soft light, creating patterns never seen before. This is the future, Lyra said into the amazed silence that followed. Not just for crystal technology, but for our peoples. We can hold on to our differences while creating something greater together. Something healing instead of destructive. The council chamber erupted in discussion, scales shifting colors as voices rose and fell. But Lyra's attention was drawn to Kravok, whose scales had taken on that unique shade she now knew was reserved for her alone. Hours later, after the council had approved their proposal for a joint research initiative, they stood in their favorite spot on the observation deck. The stolen research had been recovered, Nyrix's conspiracy exposed, and a new chapter in human-Senori relations was beginning. The council leader's scales showed acceptance patterns I've never seen before, Kravok mused. When you sang. When we sang, Lyra corrected, smiling. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Nor I. They turned to face her fully, all three eyes swirling with deep emotion. Lyra, there is a Senori tradition. A harmony bond. Different from what I shared with Nyrix. Deeper. More. Chaotic, she suggested, heart racing. Perfect in its imperfection, they agreed. If you would consider. She pressed her hand to their scales, feeling the complex frequencies that flowed between them. Show me how it works. Kravok's scales blazed with joy as they began to hum a new frequency. Lyra joined in, her voice finding harmonies she'd never known she could create. Around them, the station's crystals sang in resonance, and even the stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with their combined song. In her years of studying crystal harmonics, Lyra had documented hundreds of unique frequencies. But this impossible, beautiful convergence of human and sonori, of science and soul, would never be recorded in any database. Some songs, she realized, could only be felt, lived, shared. And as their frequencies merged into something entirely new, Lyra understood that she and Kravach hadn't just changed the future of crystal research or interspecies relations. They'd proven that the most powerful harmonies often come from the most unlikely combinations. That peace isn't found in perfect order or complete chaos, but in the brave space between where different songs meet and create their own new melody. The stars wheeled overhead, the crystals hummed their ancient songs, and two beings who should have been separated by war and physics and biology instead found themselves creating something that had never existed before, a harmony that didn't need to be understood to be perfect. And somewhere, in the vast symphony of space, new songs waited to be discovered by those brave enough to sing them together.